Okay, good morning. I cannot start my course online now, but I'm going to try every couple of minutes. I cannot log on to the system, but I'm going to record my course here, my lecture here. So last week we finished chapter 5. So today I'm going to begin chapter 6 in the second part of the book. I used to attend the King's Levee once or twice a week, Gulliver says. And I had often seen him under the barber's hand, which indeed was at first very terrible to behold, for the razor was almost twice as long as an ordinary scythe. So he watches the king as he shaves when he is sitting by the barber and the barber is shaving him. His Majesty, according to the custom of the country, was only shaved twice a week. So in that country, men only shave only twice a week. But every year I tell my students that I see that maybe you shave once a month or twice a month, most of you. I once prevailed on the barber to give me some of the suds or lather, out of which I picked 40 or 50 of the strongest stumps of hair. So, you know, the lather or soap that we put on our face before we shave. So he wants, after the barber shaves the queen, he wants some of that lather. Okay, so he picks up inside the lather, inside the foam, he picks up some pieces of hair, pieces of beard from outside the foam. And, okay, I still cannot log on to the system, strangely. Well, I'm continuing my course anyway. I'm still doing it. And I then took a piece of fine wood, cut it like the back of a comb, making several holes in it at equal distance with as small a needle as I could get from Glendalclitch. So he takes a piece of wood, and on the piece of wood he makes holes, and he places each piece of hair or beard into the wooden piece to make himself a comb. Okay, I fixed in the stumps so artificially, scraping and sloping them with my knife towards the points, that I made a very tolerable comb, which was a seasonable supply. My own being so much broken in the teeth that it was almost useless, neither did I know any artist in that country so nice and exact as would undertake to make me another. So he believes that no carpenter or no artist in that country could make him such a perfect comb, but now he makes such a comb by himself in these, impossible conditions. Okay. I'm just trying again. The system to see whether I can log on, because I frequently log off and log on to try it. No, unfortunately not. No. Okay. Yes. He uses that comb, self-made comb, to comb his hair. On the next page, the king, who, as I before observed, was a prince of excellent understanding, would frequently order that I should be brought in my box, set upon the table in his closet, would then command me to bring one of my chairs out of the box, and sit down within 3 yards distance upon the top of the cabinet, which brought me almost to a level with his face. So he is put on a high stool with his box, and it is taken out of his box. He sits on a very small chair, so he's on the same level. His face is on the same level with the king, so they can have a conversation together. All right. In this manner, I had several conversations with him. I one day took the freedom to tell His Majesty that the contempt he discovered was Europe. He discovered towards Europe, and the rest of the world did not seem answerable to those excellent qualities of the mind he was master of. That reason did not extend itself with the bulk of the body. On the contrary, we observed in our country that the tallest persons were usually least provided with it. So he says that in his country, he wants to teach the king, and he wants to tell the king about his own country. And he says that in his own country, everybody is in the same size as him. And all the other objects, houses, the cars, the animals, and the trees are in proportion to his own size. And he says that the intelligence is not related to the size of your body. And in their country, they observe that the tallest persons are given the least intelligence. That among other animals, bees and ants had the reputation of more industry, art and sagacity than many of the larger kinds, and that, as considerable as he took me to be, I hoped I might live to do His Majesty some signal service. The king heard me with attention, and began to conceive a much better opinion of me than he had ever before. He desired I would give him as exact an account of the government of England as I possibly could. Because, as fond as princes commonly are of their own customs, for so he conjectured of other monarchs by my former discourses, he should be glad to hear of anything that might deserve imitation. So he wants to find out. He's a very good man of learning, he's a good statesman and a good intellectual, and he says that he wants to learn about Gulliver's country and political government system, so that maybe if there's anything useful, they can imitate those systems in this country, in Brobdingnag. This is why Gulliver begins to tell him about his own country. I began my discourse by informing His Majesty that our dominions consisted of 2 islands, which composed 3 mighty kingdoms under one sovereign, beside our plantations in America. So the dominions consist of 2 islands. So British Empire consists of 2 islands, Britain and Ireland. And in these 2 islands, there are 3 kingdoms: England, Scotland, Wales. Ireland doesn't ever count because they hate the Irish. Hated the Irish. I dwelt long upon the fertility of our soil, the temperature of our climate. I then spoke at large upon the constitution of an English parliament, partly made up of illustrious body called the House of Peers, persons of the noblest blood, and of the most ancient and ample patrimonies. So he tells him about the House of Peers, House of Lords, and House of Commons. And the king listens to him very carefully. I described that extraordinary care was always taken of their education in arts and arms, to qualify them for being councillors born to the king and kingdom, to have a share in the legislature, to be members of the highest court of judicature, from whence there could be no appeal, and to be champions always ready for the defense of their prince and country by their valor, conduct, and fidelity. That these were the ornament and bulwark of the kingdom, worthy followers of their most renowned ancestors, whose honor had been the reward of their virtue, from which their posterity were once known to degenerate. Then, he talks about the noble people who consist the House of Lords, which was then called House of Peers. And he says that those people are selected very carefully and they are given the best education possible to govern the country. All right, so the noble people were educated in order to be governed in order to govern the country, in order to rule the country. They have the necessary education. Apart from that, they are privileged from the very beginning of their lives. That the other part of the parliament, the next paragraph, the other part of the parliament consisted of an assembly called the House of Commons. So we are all common people, we are not noble. You're not aristocrats. We are common people. And they have House of Lords, and beneath that, they have the House of Commons. And in House of Commons, who were all principal gentlemen, freely picked and culled out by the people themselves for their great abilities and love of their country to represent the wisdom of the whole nation. So these are the MPs, members of parliament, or in our Turkish system, the Turkish governmental system, they are the milletvekili. So they are elected by the people. People vote for them. And this is a little bit ironic, of course. Gulliver says that they are selected by the people for the love of their country. Okay, I'm going to try again whether I can log on to the system. I hope I can. Interesting. This doesn't work. All right. Now, okay, I continue. For and love of their country, to represent the wisdom of the whole nation. So they are supposed to represent the wisdom of everyone in the nation. And these two ladies make up the most august assembly in Europe, to whom, in conjunction with the prince, the whole legislature is committed. I then descended to the courts of justice. So how is justice accomplished in this society? Is there any justice? Over which the judges, those venerable sages and interpreters of the law, presided for determining the disputed rights and properties of man, as well as for the punishment of vice and protection of innocence. I mentioned the prudent management of our treasury, the valor and achievements of our forces by sea and land. I computed the number of our people by reckoning how many millions there might be of each religious sect or political party among us. I didn't omit even our sports and pastimes, or any other particular which I thought might redound to the honor of my country. And I finished all with a brief historical account of affairs and events in England for about 100 years past. So he doesn't only talk about the government and political system, he also talks about the justice system, he also talks about the culture of his country, cultural life of his country. He also talks about the social norms of his country, to show the king that his country is a nice place. He wants to convince him that his country is a nice place. On the next page, the next paragraph. When I had put an end to these long discourses, His Majesty, in a sixth audience, consulting his nose, proposed many doubts, queries, and objections upon every article. Now, this is the most interesting part of the book. Gulliver, being a proud member of his nation, talks about his country to indicate that, to show that his country is a perfect place. They have a perfect government system and political system, but the king listens to him very carefully. And he is going to ask him questions because he has doubts, suspicions, his objections, and he has many questions upon each article. He asked what methods were used to cultivate the minds and bodies of our young nobility, and what kind of business they commonly spend the first and teachable part of their lives. Very good question. What are the criteria to select those noble people And how do they spend their lives, the first part of their lives? Do they work? Do they have education? What kind of education do they have, if they have any education? What course was taken to supply that assembly when any noble family became extinct? So the nobility, passes from father to son, and if the family becomes extinct, non-existent, then how do you decide on a new family to replace? What qualifications were necessary in those who were to be created new lords? If there are no more lords, then if you need a new lord, what is your criteria to declare somebody as a lord? Well, actually, the criteria was being the owner of a land. If you owned a large land of the country, you were a lord, all right, because it was a feudal system, and you were a lord, and then you were given a title, and the records of your ancestry had to be taken. So your great-grandfathers, great-great-great-grandfathers had to be recorded, so the history should continue. The history of your family should continue. Whether the humor of the prince, or sum of money to a court lady, or a prime minister, or a design of strengthening a party opposite to the public interest, ever happened to be motives in those advancements? What share of knowledge these lords had in the laws of their country, and how they came by it, so as to enable them to decide the properties of their fellow subjects in the last resort? Whether they were always so free from avarice, partialities, or want that a bribe or some other sinister view could have no place among them? Whether those holy lords I spoke of were always promoted to that rank upon account of their knowledge in religious matters, and the sanctity of their lives had never been compliers with the times while they were common priests or slavish prostitute chaplains to some nobleman whose opinions they continued servilely to follow after they were admitted into that assembly. So now we see that the king has lots of criticisms and objections to the system about the nobility. What are the criteria to select the nobles? What kind of education do they have? If a noble family, all members of the family die, how do you decide on a new noble family? How do you select a new lord? Do they have, humorous abilities? Do they have large sums of money, such and such? So the king wants to have some logic of this. All right. On the next page, he gives him. Our character Gulliver gives him an account of history. How many victories has his country won? How many wars have they won? Okay, and he thinks that his country is full of brave history, glorious history, victorious people. But the king says on page 139, he was perfectly astonished with the historical account I gave him of our affairs during the last century, protesting it was only a heap of conspiracies, rebellions, murders, massacres, revolutions, banishments, the very worst effects that avarice, faction, hypocrisy, perfidiousness, cruelty, rage, madness, hatred, envy, lust, malice, or ambition could produce. Terrible account of history.